Okay, so since you dissected the brain yesterday and cut a sagittal section, you may have seen all of this, right? You saw all the ventricles. Well, you guys will do it later, yeah, on Friday probably. But those who did, that's good. So you might have also seen this part of the brain called the diencephalon. So wherever you have these special names, it's important for you to know those. So it consists of the thalamus, which is this egg-shaped area. There are two thalami. Below the thalamus is this area called the hypothalamus, hypo meaning below. And a bit posteriorly is this area called epithalamus, in which the pineal gland is the important area that we will be talking about. This part here, the pineal gland. So let's look at some functions. For all areas, you must know the cavity related to that. So third ventricle, so you can see that all of this is where the third ventricle is. So thalamus, it's really important. The most important probable function of the thalamus is it is the sensory relay station. All sensations which are traveling to the brain relay, or rather most of them, other than very, very special ones, they relay in the thalamus and then they go to the brain. Even those special sensations, actually, you have another area of the thalamus where you have swellings called geniculate bodies present. And these, in the geniculate bodies, these are for auditory, the hearing, and for the visual pathway. So again, you can see a sensation relaying over there. And then because it's connected to many areas of the brain, it acts like a mediator of the functions, gets information from here, sends information there, and kind of mediates, acts like a moderator. So that these are some of the important functions of the thalamus. Hypothalamus, the area which is present here, it is actually often called the master gland. Previously, they used to call the pituitary the master gland, but hypothalamus truly is the master gland because this is the one that controls the pituitary. And through the pituitary, it therefore has endocrine functions. It also is the body thermostat. So whenever your body temperature goes up, the hypothalamus sends impulses down to the sympathetic nervous system, causing sweating, and so it brings the temperature down. If, on the other hand, your body temperature goes down, it will activate muscles, cause shivering. The sympathetic nervous system then causes vasoconstriction, so heat is not lost. So it kind of keeps the body temperature normal. Very important, as you can see, for many of the other body functions like thirst, your sleep-wake cycle, it also is part of something known as the limbic system. So therefore, it takes part in controlling emotions and biological rhythms, and the sleep-wake cycle is one of those biological rhythms. It also monitors osmotic pressure because in the hypothalamus, you will see when we do the endocrine system, two very important hormones are produced called ADH and oxytocin. So the osmotic pressure monitoring is done, and if the osmotic pressure rises to too much, then ADH is secreted. It controls the temperature of blood, and it's a relay center for olfactory reflexes as well. The epithalamus, which is this part, the pineal gland, which we are concerned with, it's important, and again, we'll do this when we do endocrine system, but it's a good time to remember it now. It secretes a hormone called melatonin, and that's responsible for maintaining your sleep-wake cycle, or what is also known as the diurnal rhythm. Then we move to the brainstem, and this is the ventral view of the brainstem. And if you go back to the previous slide, up here you can see you're taken a sagittal section. So this is the ventral view of the brainstem, and this part here is the dorsal view of the brainstem. And in the brainstem, on the dorsal view, in relation to the midbrain, you have this area present, which is called corpora quadrigemina, which is also known as colliculi. So I'll be talking about these colliculi. There are two superior and two inferior colliculi. So there are four. So that's why it's called quadrigemina, quadri meaning four. So if we look at the brainstem, It consists of the midbrain, pons, and the medulla. And here in the ventral view, this area is the midbrain, this is the pons, and this is the medulla. Most of the cranial nerves arise from here, the majority, except you can see over there, except for 1 and 2. Cranial nerve 1 arises from the olfactory epithelium of your nose and is again connected to the cerebrum. 2 also. Except for those 2, everything else arises from some part or the other of the brainstem. The cavity of the brainstem is the cerebral aqueduct. And if we look at the midbrain, the cavity of the midbrain, sorry, not the brainstem. The cavity of the midbrain is the cerebral aqueduct because the rest of the brainstem has the 4th ventricle. If you look at the midbrain, on the ventral aspect, you can see these 2 sort of thick pillar-like structures. These are known as crus cerebri or cerebral peduncles, and they transmit motor fibers from the brain down to the spinal cord. So this is the ventral aspect. On the dorsal aspect, if I turn this around, and since I don't have a picture there, so here on the dorsal aspect, this is where I told you were those colliculi. So that's what it refers to. So you have 4 colliculi, which are relay centers for auditory reflexes and visual reflexes. So you have a superior colliculus and you have an inferior colliculus. Superior for auditory, inferior colliculus for vision. Cranial nerves 3 and 4 arise from the midbrain, and all of the brainstem is actually connected to the cerebellum. The cerebellum lies on the side like this. So if I take the midbrain, I take one part, and then this area is the pons, and this area is the medulla. This is connected to the cerebellum, this is connected to the cerebellum, and this is connected to the cerebellum, like this. And this would be called superior cerebellar peduncle. Peduncle means like a thick band of fibers. You can see that this is also called a peduncle. It's a thick band of fibers. This one would be called middle, because the pons is the middle part of the brainstem, and this one from the medulla would be called inferior. So if we did midbrain, pons, and medulla, so midbrain is connected by superior, pons by middle, and medulla by inferior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellum, and what they do is they help transfer information from the spinal cord to the cerebellum or from the cerebral cortex to the cerebellum. Next part of the brainstem, the middle part, is the pons. Its cavity is the 4th ventricle. It has numerous nerves which arise from here, the 5th to the 8th. So 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th cranial nerves arise from here. Pons is connected to the motor cortex as well as the cerebellum. So what it does is it gets information from the motor cortex and transfers it to the cerebellum. And so the cerebellum is apprised of all that's going on and being interpreted in the motor cortex. It also has the vital respiratory centers. Vital centers are present in the pons and the medulla. In the pons, you have the respiratory center. In the medulla, you have both respiratory and cardiac. So when we look at the medulla, its cavity is the 4th ventricle, just like the pons. And this one connects the cerebral cortex with the spinal cord and also connects the fibers from the spinal cord to the cerebellum. So it also connects the spinal cord to the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. The motor tracts cross here in the medulla. You remember we said that the cerebral hemisphere, so we said this is one cerebral hemisphere and this is a person like this. Remember, this cerebral hemisphere influences this opposite side, right? So motor crossing occurs in the medulla. Sensory crossing, most of the sensory crossing, so sensations from one side of the body go to the opposite parietal lobe. Most of the crossing occurs in the spinal cord, but there's a small part of one sensation which also crosses in the medulla. So in either case, you can see the crossing has to occur at some point so that that's the only way that the opposite cerebral hemisphere will control one side of the body. Okay? And we'll be looking at pictures there. Nerves 9th to 12th, so glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal arise from here, and it has the two vital centers. In fact, when there is death by hanging and the person, dies immediately, it's because the dens of the axis vertebra, you remember the axis vertebra had a little projection called the odontoid process or the dens, that really breaks off and presses against the medulla, and it presses against these two vital centers, and that's what causes death. Then we look at the cerebellum. This is often called the little brain. Unlike the cerebral cortex, this controls the same side of the body. So it controls the same side of the body. So impulses going to the cerebellum will go from the right side to the right cerebellum. Or when the cerebellum has to control motor activity, right cerebellar hemisphere will control the right side of the body. When we make a section through the cerebellum, you can see that the gray matter is on the outside like the cerebral cortex, and the white matter is in the middle. But the white matter kind of goes in and it has a fern-like pattern. So if you notice the white matter, it kind of goes in like this, and it's kind of got a little fern or tree-like pattern. And that tree-like or fern-like pattern is what is known as arbor vitae. It's connected to all the parts of the central nervous system, to the cerebrum, the brainstem, and the spinal cord. And what it does is, its main function is, it gets information from all these areas, makes sure that whatever information it's getting and whatever information is being sent from these areas to the muscles, they match. So for example, if there is the intention to flex, the cerebral cortex will send out information to the muscles to cause flexion. The cerebellum makes sure that the flexion is only till the intended amount. That means you don't flex more than necessary. So with the result, what it does is it helps to harmonize muscle tone. So, for example, when you reach for an object, you're reaching not in a jerky fashion like this, but your movements are extremely smooth. So by harmonizing muscle tone and muscle activity, it makes sure that everything is very smooth. It also makes sure that movements are very sequentially done and also smoothly. And there is a correction of movement errors. So, for example, if you have to reach and pick up a pen. So, the pen is lying here, so you'll reach only this far and pick up the pen. You do not go beyond that. So if your body is trying to do that, the cerebellum gets information that more is being done. It'll immediately correct it so that you won't reach beyond and you'll only, reach as far as you need. This you will find whenever the cerebellum is damaged, and I have a little video to show you that if you ask a person to touch their nose, for example, they can see that the nose is here. They know that the nose is here, but they are not able to kind of go here. They'll go past the nose. So you can see that error is not corrected. Okay? So that's the function of the cerebellum. You'll also see that these people, their movement is not smooth. It's kind of a bit jerky, and they get what are known as tremors. So that's why this coordinated, smooth skeletal muscle activity is disturbed whenever there is a cerebellar lesion. The cavity of the cerebellum is again not mentioned here, but the cavity is the fourth ventricle. It forms the roof of the fourth ventricle. The cerebellum forms the roof of the fourth ventricle. Here you can see. So here's the floor of the fourth ventricle formed by the pons and the medulla, and the roof formed by the cerebellum. Let's look at the blood supply of the brain, rather important, because any hemorrhage in any of these vessels or any clot in any of these vessels actually causes a brain attack, which is what you know as a stroke. The two major arteries which take part in the blood supply of the brain are the vertebral and internal carotid. So that's why it's often called the vertebrocarotid system. And they join up and form something called a circle, which is actually called circle of Willis. The Willis is being hidden. So here you can see, here's the internal carotid artery. Here's the vertebral artery. So there are two vertebral arteries, two internal carotid arteries, one on either side. The two vertebral arteries join and form a single artery called basilar, and then this divides, you can see, into two branches, which is called posterior cerebral. The two internal carotids, they divide into a middle cerebral and something known as an anterior cerebral. The A, M, and P stand for anterior, middle, and posterior cerebral. These are in turn joined by little tiny branches which are known as communicating arteries. So can you see that a whole circle is formed here? This is important because if one of these branches was blocked, so blood from here cannot pass through, what will happen? It will reroute its way and it will make sure that all parts of the brain get their blood supply. Okay, so this really helps reroute the blood supply. Wherever their blood supply is very important in most organs, you will find that there is a very rich anastomosis. In the circle of Willis, you often find that the wall of the circle of Willis, in about 10% of the population, the wall tends to get dilated. It could happen in any branch. So if this is the normal branch, the wall gets dilated and that forms what is known as an aneurysm. Those aneurysms are called berry aneurysms, and quite often those berry aneurysms are the ones which rupture and lead to hemorrhage in the brain and cause a stroke. But sometimes it may just be found on accident. And if you look up here, this is showing you the circle of Willis, and here you can see an aneurysm, a berry aneurysm. And here in somebody an angiogram was done, and this here is an aneurysm right at the point where the basilar artery is dividing into its two main branches. So when you find that, if the aneurysm is really large, they do something known as coiling, because obviously it's like a time bomb ticking in your head, like you can't let it be. So what they'll do is they'll put something like a wire inside and it'll really coil inside like that. So they completely kind of close off that aneurysm so that it gets fibrosed and blood no longer flows through that, and so there'll be no pressure and it won't rupture. Okay? But the aneurysms have to be a certain size in order for you to do the coiling. Next, we'll look at the spinal cord. So you can take a look at all of this. Some important things up here, you should know where it begins and where it ends. The spinal cord does not extend through the entire length of the vertebral canal. It ends at the level of L1 or L2 vertebra, and beyond that, the spinal cord continues as a sheaf of fibers which is known as cauda equina, and we'll see this. In children, it ends a little bit lower, so it ends at L3 vertebra in children. Like the brain, it is surrounded by meninges and the subarachnoid space. But the subarachnoid space also does not extend all the way down. It goes only up to S2. So wherever you have these levels, it's important for you to kind of remember them. So remember, the cord itself ends at L1, but the subarachnoid space ends at L2. Where the cord ends, we'll see that that area is called, because it looks conical, it's called the Conus medullaris. And from there on, there's a thin filament which comes down. And I said also that after the cord ends, you still have lumbar and sacral fibers which have to come out of the intervertebral foramina. So you get a sheaf of nerve fibers called cauda equina. Cauda meaning tail, equina like a horse's tail. So that's why we have cauda equina. We'll see that the spinal cord is enlarged in the cervical and lumbar areas, and that's because in the cervical area is from where the limbs have to be supplied. So you need more gray matter there. So that's why the cord is enlarged. Lumbar area is where the lower limb has to be supplied. So again, you need more gray matter to supply the muscles of this area. So it's enlarged. And then we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and we'll see how they are divided. And when you want to withdraw fluid from the spinal cord, that withdrawal is called lumbar puncture. And remember, we said that if there was blood in the fluid, that you withdraw in CSF, then that's because there's bleeding in the subarachnoid space, right? So you want to do it beyond where the cord ends. So you don't want to do it at anywhere above L2 because you could hit the cord. So that's why you do below L2 in adults and below L3 in children, because that's where the cord ends. Beyond that, you have only a sheaf of nerve fibers. So if you were to poke your needle through, the fibers just move out. So you're less likely to pin a single fiber than one solid structure. So here you can see the cord. This is the cervical lumbar enlargement. Look at this area here. The image is a little small, but you can still see it. So this is where it ends like a cone, so called conus medullaris, and from it this thin green filament, shown in green, is the filum terminale, which attaches the cord to the coccyx. And here are the sheaf of nerve fibers. So you can see how these sheaf of nerve fibers, as they keep passing out through their respective intervertebral foramina. So these are lumbar and sacral spinal nerves, and they form a thing looking like a tail. That's why it's called cauda equina. And here's the cord surrounded by the various meninges, just like the brain. And this is the dura mater. And outside the dura, this is what is called the epidural space. So it has a lot of fat and a vertebral venous plexus which is present. So, veins on the outside. Just like the brain. Remember, even the brain, you had in the epidural space, you had the meningeal blood vessels. So they were both arteries and veins. But here in the spinal cord, in this epidural space, you only have veins. Now, when we look at the white matter of the spinal cord, it's the opposite of the brain. In the brain, the gray matter was on the outside and the white matter was in the center. This is switched, okay? And we'll see that the white matter is kind of arranged in columns, or what are known as funiculi. And in the white matter, you have those collections of axons which were called tracts. So you have tracts which go up to the brain, carrying sensory information, so they are known as ascending tracts. You have tracts which come down from the brain, bringing motor information. Those are known as descending tracts. And these tracts are not in a haphazard fashion. So there is a tract which carries pain and temperature. It lies in a particular area. There is a tract which carries touch sensation. Remember I said the parietal lobe receives information. You can hold an object in your hand with your eyes closed and still say what that object is. So there's a tract which carries that. That also has a specific location. Motor or descending tracts which bring information down, they also have specific location. And if you look at the names, you can tell whether it's an ascending or a descending tract, because where it begins, that is first, where it ends is second. So if you have something called spinothalamic, that means it's going from the spinal cord to the thalamus. It's going up. So what kind of tract would it be? Sensory. You have corticospinal, from the cortex to the spinal cord. Can you see? So it would be descending. Or corticonuclear. Nuclear because in the brainstem, the various cranial nerves have collections which are called nuclei. So again, descending. Or vestibulospinal or rubrospinal, from the red nucleus to the spinal cord. So again, you can see it's coming down. Okay? So these would be descending. Then when we take a section of the spinal cord, we'll see how the gray matter is arranged. It has various horns in it. The white matter, as we said, is the one that contains the tracts. And these are how we talk of the tracts. And then you'll also see how the spinal nerves come. And right at the beginning, when we did the introduction, we said that the spinal nerves are attached to the cord. If you remember, there were two roots. The dorsal was sensory and the ventral was motor. So now we are actually going to look at those. So let's take a look at that. So here is a picture of the spinal cord. Here's the gray matter in the center, the white matter which is peripheral. And the white matter is kind of arranged in three columns. There's this column which is present posteriorly, this column which is present laterally, and this column which is present anteriorly. Okay, so these are known as funiculi, or just, for example, here, lateral funiculus, okay? And this one would be posterior funiculus or posterior column. And this one would be anterior funiculus or anterior column, just to divide it into lateral, posterior, and anterior. Then the gray matter is kind of, as you can see, H-shaped. Notice how the central canal, which is continuous with the fourth ventricle above, is lying in the middle of the gray matter. So, you must pay attention because you could get a question. The central canal lies in the white matter. So if you paid attention to the picture, you notice that it's not in the white matter, it's in the gray matter. And this has, you can see it's kind of has these little projections. These are called horns. So since this part is lying posteriorly, this would be called the posterior horn. This lies anterally, it's called anteriorly, sorry, it's called anterior or ventral horn. Posterior or also dorsal horn. And then here we have a lateral horn, and the lateral horn is only present where the autonomic nervous system arises. So it's present between T1 to L2 for the sympathetic, and remember parasympathetic had S2 to 4. So just in these areas you find this extra lateral horn. Other areas you won't find a lateral horn. So just to give you an example, look at the cervical region. You don't see a lateral horn. Thoracic region, you see a lateral horn. Then below lumbar 2, no lateral horn. Then when you come to sacral 3, again you see a lateral horn. So this shows you that. And then in this, because this is gray matter, this is where the nerve cells will be. So this part here would be, these cells would be called anterior horn cells. These cells which would be present here would be called posterior horn cells. And we'll see how anterior horn cells give rise to motor fibers and posterior horn cells receive sensory fibers. So they receive sensory fibers, go to posterior horn, anterior horn cells give rise to motor fibers and they go out. And here you can see how the spinal nerve connects to the cord. It really connects by roots. We said a dorsal and a ventral root, but instead of one single root, it's really that root is broken up into small parts called rootlets. And in relation to the dorsal horn, if you remember, there was this little swelling. What was this called? Dorsal root ganglion, which has the cell bodies of sensory fibers, right? You remember, because the dorsal root was a sensory root. So here, if we take a section through one part of the spinal cord and see, bless you, see how sensations travel, how the nerve is attached. So this is the spinal nerve. This part here is the spinal nerve. This is the dorsal root. This is the ventral root. And if you look at sensory fibers, so from the skin area, a sensory fiber from anywhere. So let's say that this was the thoracic 10 segment of the spinal cord, which supplies the area of your umbilicus. So pain or anything from your umbilicus would travel in a spinal nerve and reach the spinal nerve, and then it would go into the dorsal root. And this is the cell body which is present here. Then it would enter into the dorsal horn where it will synapse with another neuron present there. Second neuron will start. Look at how it's crossing. And then this is only from T10. So you'll have many fibers from below that and above that, right, in the spinal cord. So they'll all join up like this and they'll form a tract. So from one area they will come like this, go up. From above they'll come like this, go this way. From below they'll come like this, go. So you can see one tract is going to be formed of all axons. So that tract, this particular tract which I'm showing, which carries pain, lies in this area of the spinal cord. So that's a specific area for that, and this is called the lateral spinothalamic tract. Just that tells you spinothalamic, going from spinal cord to thalamus. Lateral meaning lying in the lateral funiculus, okay? This is going, it synapses in the thalamus, and from there it goes to the parietal lobe. Remember, the parietal lobe was the one which receives sensation. So you can see from the right side of the body, or if say this was the left side of the body, it's going to the right parietal lobe. Now motor fibers coming down. So from the right frontal cortex, the precentral gyrus, fibers come, they cross in the medulla. So in the medulla they cross. So they cross over from the right to the left side. And they travel down as the corticospinal tract. So you can see many fibers will travel and they'll be together like a tract. And then they will come and synapse on the anterior horn cell. So that's how the precentral gyrus controls motor activity. From the anterior horn, cells begin, travel in the ventral root and go to the muscle. So you can see anterior horn cells are lying in the gray matter of the spinal cord, whereas sensory neurons are lying outside the gray matter, right? Okay? By somatotopic arrangement, this just means that the fibers are stacked in such a way that they have a very orderly arrangement. So if you were to represent the body, the fibers which belong to the head and neck area would be medial most, the fibers from the lower limbs would be lateral most. So if someone had pain in a certain area, you can understand that if you wanted to destroy the whole tract, you go in the cervical region, you can cut out the whole tract. If you go in the lumbar, if they had only lower limb pain, you'd go in the lumbar region and just cut them out. These same tracts are shown here. So here you can see how all the fibers are kind of joining up. So here it just shows one fiber, and this fiber is crossing, traveling like this. So, and then, many such fibers keep joining from other areas. So you can see one whole big tract is formed here, and it goes up. So these are all beginning on this side. So if we said left, they cross over and go to the right, and they finally will go to the right cortex, right? So you can understand if this was cut here, the effect would be seen on the opposite side. Here, if you look at motor fibers, these are descending. This side is descending. So they come from the cerebral cortex, which is not shown here. So let's say they come from one precentral gyrus and travel all the way down. So they're traveling on one side. They come down, and look at the crossing. The crossing occurs in the medulla. And so from the right cortex, they go to the opposite side, so they control movements of the body on the left side. So if this was cut, where do you think the problem would be seen? If I said the right side was cut, where would which side muscles of the body would be affected? Left side, right? Because they would no longer pass information there. So, if you got a question like this, how would you answer this? Okay, so this person had an injury on the left side. Okay, so she will therefore suffer loss of pain sensation on the right side. She had an injury between which involved T4 and T5. So everything above that is going to be normal, right? It's only below that there's going to be a problem. And the problem is going to be on the opposite side. She had the injury on the left side. So the problem is going to be on the right side below T5 segment. It's not going to be on the right side above T5 segment, and here's why. So look, let's take a look at this picture. So you've understood the concept. It's just a question of below and above. So if I cut this here, right? Problem, anything going from here going up can no longer go because the cord is cut. But something going from here can still travel up because up here the cord is normal, right? So the problem is going to be below where it's cut, not above, okay? Then when we look at the blood supply of the spinal cord, so just as we looked at the brain, the blood supply of the spinal cord is mainly through vertebral arteries. And these vertebral arteries are 2 in number. They join to form 1, and they help to supply the brain as well. And here the vertebral arteries give off what are called anterior and posterior spinal arteries. But the spinal cord is so long, so the vertebral arteries are not able to kind of maintain their blood supply all the way down. So what helps them are these arteries which are known as segmental arteries. If you remember when we did the skeletal system and we were talking about intervertebral foramina, and I told you passing through the intervertebral foramina was spinal nerves and blood vessels. So at every level you can see these spinal, traveling with the spinal nerves are these segmental blood vessels which go in and they kind of actually help to reinforce the vertebral arterial branches, and they help to supply the spinal cord. And in fact, at the lumbar level, there's one particular artery, usually on the left side, which is rather important, which is often known as the arteria magna, magna meaning big. And it kind of helps to supply the remaining part of the spinal cord. It's very difficult right from the foramen magnum to go all the way down. So, you know, below the lumbar level, the arteria magna usually becomes very important. Let's look at referred pain. When you touch your skin, you can feel all kinds of sensations, skin all over the body, or even mucous membrane, like your conjunctiva, your throat, your oral cavity. You can feel sensations like heat, temperature, pain, touch. You can feel that. But from an organ, the pain is not felt. If I actually pinched the heart, there would be no pain, unless I impeded blood supply. Pain from an organ, which is known as visceral pain, is either because of ischemia, that means lack of blood supply, or if there is too much stretch or spasm of muscle. So if something is stretched a lot, like for example, little children, babies tend to be very colicky. We say they're crying all the time, they're colicky. That's because they have a lot of air inside their intestinal tract, which stretches the intestinal tract, and that's what gives rise to colic. When someone has an artery blocked in the heart, if they suffer from something known as myocardial infarction, or they may have angina, because the heart muscle in that time at that area is ischemic, and that gives rise to pain. Now what happens is that this pain is based on these organs developing in fetal life, wherever they develop. For example, the heart in fetal life developed actually very close to the cervical and the upper thoracic region, and then it drops down here in its final place. So based on where they were embryologically derived from, they send their sensations to those segments of the spinal cord. Okay? So let's say someone has a heart attack up here, and so there is ischemia, the pain travels from here, it goes to the upper thoracic segments of the spinal cord, then travels all the way up to the brain, and the brain gets the pain. But pain also from the skin area of the body, from the same thoracic segments of the spinal cord, also reaches the brain, okay? The brain is a bit confused. It misinterprets the information. And this is exactly like, because imagine you are used to getting phone calls from your friend all the time. So, let's say your friend calls you at 4 o'clock in the evening every day. So at 4 o'clock in the evening, when your phone rings, you don't really look at it. You automatically assume that it's your friend who has called. But let's say one day St. Pete College calls you and tells you, what classes have been cancelled. Because you expect the call to be from your friend, you misinterpret it and think it's your friend who's calling. Then later, when you actually look at it and you talk to the person, then you realize it was not your friend, right? Brain does the same thing. It misinterprets it. So it can get information from the heart, but it can also get information from the skin, and both of them send the information to the same segments of the spinal cord from which it is relayed to the brain. Your brain is constantly bombarded every day with information from the skin. You're always touching yourself, hitting, hurting, some temperature, all that. Your skin sensations go to the brain all the time. So it's like that 4 o'clock call from your friend every day. So when the brain, and it's not every day, and hopefully you will never suffer a heart attack, but it's not every day that people suffer a heart attack. So when it does get information from the heart, the brain in the beginning misinterprets that information, thinking it's coming from an area it normally gets information from, which is the same segments of the spinal cord. So the brain tells you that the pain is coming from the arm and the front of the chest, which is what it's referring the pain here. So you believe what the brain tells you. So you think when you have a heart attack, that's why people say when they have a heart attack, they have pain on the front of the chest wall. The pain is referred to the medial side of the arm, because those are areas supplied by the thoracic segments of the spinal cord. Later, and that pain is a bit vague because the brain cannot localize that pain. Later, the pain becomes more more localized, and then you realize that. So by knowing which areas of the organs share with areas on the skin, physicians and surgeons can actually predict. Because if you went and said, if they didn't know that the heart and the thoracic region of the spinal cord shared the same segments, when a person comes to you and says, oh, I have pain on the front of my chest wall, I have pain going down here, you would start examining the skin and find nothing wrong and not know. But because surgeons and physicians know which areas share that, then we can automatically diagnose where the problem is lying. And that's the basis of referred pain, the misinterpretation by the brain of pain coming from an organ, but referring it to an area of skin because they share the same spinal segments. So just to give you an example, the appendix shares the same spinal segment as the umbilicus here, which is the T10 segment. So when someone has appendicitis, the pain is first referred to the umbilical area, and then it localizes to where the appendix is. So the gallbladder, for example, shares the same segment as a cervical, which is this area, the shoulder. So anybody with gallbladder pain or liver pain usually refers it to the shoulder on that side because the same cervical segments. Okay, so that's the basis of referred pain. This is a picture showing you the lumbar puncture, which we do below L2 and in adults L3. And normally when you withdraw the fluid, it should be very, very clear. If you withdraw and there's blood in it, it's suggestive of bleeding in the subarachnoid space. So you can see here you want to do it below L2 or L3 because here the sheaf of nerve fibers like this, when you put the needle in, these nerves will kind of move out of the way. If on the other hand you had a solid structure up here, like say you did it higher up, what would happen? You can pin this solid structure to bone and you would injure the spinal cord, which is why you do it at this lower level. You can also push anesthesia. You can push it into the subarachnoid space. You'll first withdraw fluid, then push the anesthetic fluid. That would be a lumbar anesthesia. Or you could actually, you don't even need to go into the subarachnoid space. You can go into the epidural space. So you can actually put a catheter in, push it here and push your anesthetic fluid, and it will anesthetize all the nerves as they come out. So based on where you want to do surgery, you can do this kind of either lumbar or epidural anesthesia. Epidural is usually given for labor pains because you kind of anesthetize the lower sacral segments of the spinal cord. Let's look at some lesions. I've been talking about them as we were going along. Frontal lobe. If you look at the functions, you automatically come to know what the lesions would be. Remember, the frontal lobe has the precentral gyrus or the motor cortex, which controls the opposite side of the body, voluntary movement on the opposite side. So if in the frontal lobe, the precentral gyrus is gone, if there's damage there, you'll have contralateral, meaning opposite side, paralysis of muscles. And this is what is known as upper motor neuron paralysis, because the cell bodies start in the cerebral cortex. So if you look at these motor fibers, cell bodies start here, they travel all the way down, they cross in the medulla, and they come to the spinal cord on this side. And they synapse on the anterior horn cells. And these anterior horn cells are the second fibers, so these are known as lower motor neuron because they're below and these are on top, so these are called upper motor neuron. Remember, Broca's area is present there, so if that is gone, then the person cannot express themselves. They know what to say, but they're not able to articulate their words properly. Remember also, this area, this prefrontal cortex, was very important for judgment, for intellect, for social behavior, for inhibitions, and so on. If so that area is gone, the person behaves in a totally unacceptable manner. They have a mercurial temperament. They kind of lose their temper whenever they talk. They do not talk properly. They do things which are not socially acceptable. And that's because the prefrontal area is gone. If the parietal lobe is damaged, remember this parietal lobe was the post-central gyrus, this part here. And so that was receiving sensations. So you would have sensory loss from the opposite half of the body. Also, remember I said the parietal lobe was very important for spatial relations And I told you this, that, the very fact that, there are two sides of your body. If people have parietal lobe problems, they will neglect one half of them. They apply makeup only on one side, they neglect the other side. This is known as hemi-neglect. They also are not able to associate themselves with space. Like I gave you that example that normally we might forget where we parked our car, but that's normal. It's a huge parking lot. But otherwise, you can find your way to your car, you can find your way in your house, you can find your way in unfamiliar surroundings also. Once you're told once, you usually are able to find your way. In these people, they are not able to do that. So they lose their way even in their own house. They're not able to find their way. So that's what is called loss of spatial relations. The Wernicke's area is present here, so they cannot so this part is called receptive aphasia. That means they cannot comprehend what or understand what's being said to them. So with the result, what they talk is in a word salad. So, they talk properly, they're able to speak proper words, but it's all jumbled up because they don't understand what you ask them. And taste is a function of this lobe, so taste sensation would also go if that area is damaged. Temporal lobe is important for hearing loss, and also for the Wernicke's area is present here too. In fact, most of it is here. So if the temporal lobe is gone, they could have hearing loss or agnosia, that means loss, or they are not able to understand, the same with over here. And so hence they speak properly, but whatever question you ask them, they give you answers which don't go with the question you're asking. Occipital lobe was responsible for visual field, for vision, but in vision it is the visual field that is important. That means the right occipital cortex is responsible for the left visual field. So when you look at any object, there's a right side to it and there's a left side to it. So from the left side, all the impulses go to the right occipital cortex and vice versa. So if one occipital lobe is damaged, the opposite visual field will go. So you won't be able to identify the object there. The area in the eye called the macula, where you have maximum visual acuity, that area usually gets spared because most of these lesions which occur are because of blood vessel problems. But the macula has an anastomosis going on there. So even if one blood vessel is clogged or there's a clot or hemorrhages, the other blood vessel in that area is able to keep up the supply. So macula usually gets spared. Yeah.
So lesion is just like the dying of the tissue?
Dying, yes. In the brain, central nervous system, if the tissue dies, it will not regenerate. So that's what happens. Usually it's not an entire lobe which goes. So I'm just giving you all these problems which any one of these could occur. If the whole lobe goes for some reason, then obviously all will go. Okay? Yeah. What is anastomosis? Anastomosis means where blood vessels join. And usually we talk about anastomosis in relation to arteries. So if one area has a blood supply like this and another artery coming, these arteries join one another like this. Okay, so imagine if there's a clot up here, blood could flow this way. Like the circle of Willis which we just saw, that's what an anastomosis is. Okay. Cerebellar lesions, when you have cerebellum, you do not have any paralysis because the cerebellum is not responsible for controlling voluntary activity. It's only responsible for controlling smoothness and maintaining tone. So what happens is the tone goes, so there is decreased muscle tone. So, normally like even when you pick up a baby by the arms, the baby gives some resistance. They're not all floppy like that. Yeah, like this child up here. So in cerebellar lesions, the tone is gone. So that area feels extremely flabby. So they are able to perform their action, but that action is not done smoothly. It may be jerky. They may even have a problem with gait, so they may not be able to maintain their posture. They might because they tend to fall, they will walk with a broad-based gait like this so that they can keep their balance. The muscles contract extremely weakly, and because the coordination is gone, the muscles tremble. So that trembling is known as tremors, and I'll show you a video of how these muscles act. And here, and remember, I said that you cannot control your movements well. So if you need to touch your nose, for example, you go past. So let's take a look at this person here.
Of tremor disorder, in addition to rest tremor and postural tremor, is intention action tremor seen with cerebellum.
So this side
disease.
is okay.
In this patient who has had a traumatic hemorrhage involving one side of his cerebellar white matter pathways, he has a normal function on the right side, but the left side shows significant dysenergia and intention tremor. This type of tremor contrasts, however, with the postural tremor in that both the trajectory and the endpoint are abnormal, and most of this patient's dysfunction is in fact right at the endpoint when he tries to touch his nose or to bring his finger totally
You notice
out.
how he's having a problem kind of getting to
The
his
trajectory
nose?
is not normal, but the trajectory is not the area of maximal dysfunction. This type of tremor can also be seen in multiple sclerosis and other primary cerebellar disorders.
So this kind of goes on just to show that. So here you can see how the other one he could do. He knows his nose is here. He's just not able to coordinate because the cerebellum is gone. And then let's look at one disease. There are so many diseases of the nervous system, not possible to do all of them. But multiple sclerosis, I picked this because this is one of those diseases which you see every day. It's an autoimmune disease, tends to affect females more than males. And here there is demyelination of the tracts. So both ascending and descending tracts are demyelinated, which means the transmission of impulses becomes very, very slow. So with the result, there's weakness of the limbs. The person can't use the limbs. Fatigue becomes a common symptom. They can't, they get tired very frequently. If the optic nerve, usually that gets demyelinated, they may not be able to see properly, so that might happen. They may have problems with swallowing. If the pharyngeal muscles get affected, its treatment is given, you have rest and steroids are given, and nowadays they give something known as beta interferon, which kind of helps. And they do see that because the myelin is gone, that they do see in remissions that the myelin sheath is able to kind of, to some extent, reconstruct itself and come back. But again, when the antibodies affect the myelin, attack the myelin, again, the whole thing gets exacerbated. So they have periods where they're absolutely fine, and then they have periods when, the exacerbation is worse, and then it becomes a problem. So, a lot of things are being done to make sure that you find a treatment. Alzheimer's is another condition, different. There's no demyelination there, but that's another neurological problem which happens, where actually you have these tangles which are formed, and you get plaques, just like cholesterol plaques. These plaques are formed in the brain in Alzheimer's. And they go and they affect neurons. And most of the time, this affects in the temporal lobe, especially when memory is there. So that's why in Alzheimer's, memory loss is one of the earliest things that you see in these people.